So in Community Land Trust Brussels, so CLTB, we try to do more than housing. We are trying to build homes and a community on a community-owned land. So how does this work? I will start with a small video, if it's possible. Sorry for the manipulation. Yeah. Okay, so the video goes quite fast, but after we'll have plenty of time to discuss about it.
Le Community Land Trust bruxellois, une terre partagée pour un habitat responsable. À Bruxelles, les familles avec peu de revenus qui veulent se loger découvrent rapidement deux réalités. Un déficit important de logements sociaux et un doublement des prix du logement entre 2000 et 2010. Il reste alors pour ces familles deux possibilités. Vivre dans un petit logement insalubre et cher ou quitter Bruxelles. Comment répondre à cette crise du logement et comment éviter que les prix continuent à monter? Plusieurs associations bruxelloises ont réfléchi à cette question et ont découvert aux États-Unis un système qui pourrait donner une réponse, les Community Land Trusts. Le principe de base des CLT est que le sol doit être utilisé pour répondre aux besoins des habitants et non pas comme un bien spéculatif. Un CLT est une association sans but lucratif qui acquiert, possède et gère des terrains et des bâtiments pour les rendre accessibles aux revenus les plus bas. Le principe du CLT est l'acquisition mixte. Le CLT acquiert des terrains grâce à des subsides, il reste propriétaire du terrain et il vend les logements construits sur ce terrain à des particuliers. Comme la valeur du sol n'est plus prise en compte dans la valeur du bâtiment, le logement est alors moins cher. Pour garantir que ces logements restent accessibles pour des bas revenus, un propriétaire CLT qui veut vendre son logement doit le faire à un prix plafonné. Il pourra récupérer tout ce qu'il a investi et une partie de la plus-value. Tout le monde gagne à ce système. Le premier propriétaire a la possibilité de vivre tranquillement dans sa maison, de construire un petit capital et ses enfants peuvent hériter de la maison. En cas de revente, ce logement reste accessible pour d'autres familles sans qu'un nouveau subside soit nécessaire. Ce mécanisme permet d'éviter la spéculation immobilière et rendre accessibles les logements pour des faibles revenus génération après génération. Selon ces mêmes principes, le CLT peut aussi développer commerce de proximité, des entreprises d'économie sociale, des espaces culturels et communautaires. Toutes ces activités permettent de créer de l'emploi pour les habitants du quartier. Le CLT est une association de membres. Tous les propriétaires sont automatiquement membres et d'autres personnes intéressées peuvent le devenir. Il y a 3 types de membres et tous sont représentés dans le conseil d'administration. Les ménages qui sont propriétaires d'un logement, les riverains et la société civile, et les représentants des pouvoirs publics. Chaque groupe dispose d'un tiers du pouvoir de décision. Dans le CLT de Bruxelles, les familles qui veulent acheter un logement participent déjà bien avant qu'ils soient propriétaires. Ils deviennent membres du CLT, ils épargnent, ils définissent le projet architectural de leur futur logement, tout ça collectivement avec les autres futurs propriétaires. Le CLT est un modèle de responsabilité sociale partagée. Il s'engage à gérer la terre comme un bien commun, à ne jamais la restituer aux logiques du marché et garantir perpétuellement son usage social. Il permet à des ménages pauvres de devenir propriétaires de leur logement et de s'impliquer dans un projet participatif, solidaire et convivial. Le CLT Bruxelles partage tous ces principes. Depuis 2013, il est reconnu par la région bruxelloise et reçoit des subsides qui lui permettent de développer des projets partout dans la ville, ensemble avec les futurs habitants et des associations partenaires.
Thank you very much. So I will explain it again because that was really fast, but so you have the big picture. And now, first maybe. Oh, yeah. I will try to explain you how CLT Brussels passed from like just a movement of people manifesting and organizing about the housing crisis in Brussels. Actually in Brussels, but I think it's the same in many cities, apart maybe Vienna. We cannot speak about housing crisis because the crisis is like a momentum, and now the crisis of the Brussels housing is like since 20 years, it's really getting worse and worse. and despite all our work, we are not winning that fight. So we started from a civil movement to now more than 100 families live in their own apartment in Brussels. They own it and they can give it to their children in very high quality housing. So how did we do that? First, what is a community land trust? So a CLT, or Community Land Trust, is a not-for-profit association or organization that will own land and that will always keep that land for the benefit of the community. And on the land, we'll try to develop permanently affordable housing, or sometimes other spaces like community spaces, local businesses, social economy places, workshops, urban farming for some. And the organization will be democratically run by the community. So community, land, trust, that are the three keywords on our work. The beginning of the idea is rooted in the civil rights movement in the United States. So at the late 60s, there were many people over there thinking about how to think again about property. They got some feedback, some background from some thinkers like Henry George, Ebenezer Howard, Ralph Borsodi, Arthur Morgan, and so on. And they were thinking about alternatives to the classic private property ownership. They were thinking about the examples everywhere in the world, like the kibbutzes in Israel, the Gramdan, the Gandhi movement in the villages of India. And one of the fights was the access to home ownership or to land ownership for the African Americans in many states in the United States. It was really difficult for the African Americans to get access to land, to farm, or to houses. So in 1969, there was the creation of the first CLT of the modern times. It was called New Communities Incorporated in Albany, in Georgia. In the 70s, the CLT movement was still a very marginal phenomenon. The idea was spreading very slowly. And then in 1982, the Champlain Housing Trust has been created in Burlington, Vermont, under the mayor Bernie Sanders. Now, Bernie Sanders is now very famous, but at that time it was the small mayor of a small city in the Vermont. And from there was really a gradual growth and expansion in the US of the model. In the 80s and 90s, you can see it in the small figure over there. It's the number of CLT in the United States that is going and going year after year. And since the year 2000, there started to be an international diffusion. So there is now CLTs in England, in Australia, in Costa Rica, in Canada, and even in Europe. What helped a lot was the United Nations World Habitat Award that has been given to the Champlain Housing Trust from Burlington in 2008. And that really gave a high visibility to the model. And in 2015, Puerto Rico also got a UN World Habitat Award. And in 2021, CLT Brussels has been, so there is a little mistake, it's 21. CLT Brussels has been awarded with that prize. What did we do in Brussels? So as I said, there was like what we call the housing crisis. More than 25% of the Brussels people live below the poverty line, so with very small income, alternative incomes, and not income from the work. And in Brussels, the social housing is very low, so only less than 10% of the population has access to social housing, and all the social housing stock is like less than 30,000 housing in Brussels, and there are more than 50,000, 45,000 at the time, households that were on the waiting list. So that was really not possible to continue like that. And at the same time, the housing price doubled between 2000 and 2010. And when we mean that it doubled, we will see a figure in a few minutes. It really doubled compared to the income of the people. And so, you can see here the evolution of the housing price compared to the income. So if in the let's say 75, in the middle of the 70s, you needed, I don't know, 100 months of salary to get your home. Now it would be more than 200, so it more than doubled the price of the housing compared to the income. Brussels is the black dots. It's like the Brussels agglomeration, and you can see some different neighborhoods, but in every neighborhood, the cheapest one or the more expensive one, the trend is really similar. The housing is more and more expensive compared to the income of the people. So some civil associations were thinking about that in the year 2000, 2008, and they created a project called L'Espoir, Hope in English, and the idea was to help people to become the home owners of the own home. Yeah, sorry for that. So to buy their own apartment. That really worked quite well, and so 14 homes have been created in that project called Hope. But the problem, the issue was that to make that possible, there has been a lot of work made by organizations, NGOs, associations. There has been a little subsidy also from the Brussels region, but in maybe 20 years, all the people that live in that passive home near the canal in a developing part of Brussels, maybe they will sell their home at the market price, or maybe at a very high price, to people that are not the target group that we wanted to help in the beginning, because it was for people from immigration and so on. And so we were thinking how to keep the same approach, the participatory approach, the same target group, like people with low income, but make sure that even if they become home owners, in 20 years, they cannot sell to anyone at any price. And so we discovered the CLT model thanks to a conference in Lyon from the Champlain Housing Trust. That was really very, very interesting for us. And so in 2008, we created a platform called Platforms Community and Trust Brussels. That was still really an idea, a concept. And so there were activists, there were some community organization that did a study trip to Burlington. So you can see there in one of the pictures, my colleague, coordinator, who 15 years ago, went to Burlington to see what they are doing there and try to implement it here. In 2010, we could do a feasibility study. So the Brussels region, so in Brussels, the city is very small and the region is like the metropolitan area of Brussels. The Brussels region financed a feasibility study that showed that it was really possible to create a CLT in Brussels, that all the prerequisites were there. And so we created the CLT Brussels in 2012, and it was recognized and financed by the Brussels region. So the first employees joined the team in September 2012, 10 years ago. And yeah, from there, it started to work. The first pilot project were purchased, the ground were purchased in 2013. We received, since 2014, 2 million euros of subsidy of investment from Brussels. So the subsidy of investment plus what the families will pay to get the home, that give us a budget of investment of around 5 million euros. And the first inhabitants arrived in 2015. We started some European projects, very interesting, that allowed us to develop the model and to diffuse it, disseminate it in Europe. And we started in 2019 a very interesting project called Calico, that is about care and housing on 34 apartments in Brussels. And what is interesting on this project is that some of the apartments are for our traditional target group, but some of them are also bought by a cooperative. So we can discuss about that project later on. And now we have more than 100 housing in the CLT model in Brussels, so more than 400 people living in a CLT apartment. And our subsidy has been just increased this year, and so we have now 3 million euros, which give us an investment budget of 6 million, and not 5, but 6 million euros. So how does that work? How does our model work? As you could see on the video, the idea is to make a difference between the property of the land that will belong to the community. So the community land trust really represents the community, and the property of the apartment, of the home, that is individual. In some cases, some co-op or some non-profit organization can buy the bricks, but most of the time, what we try to do is to do housing for the low-income families. And the CLT, or organization, is democratically managed by all the stakeholders. And that's very interesting for us and very important that the homeowners, but also the public official representative of the region and of the city, and other community members interested by what we are doing are together in our board of directors. And that really help to get a balance between the interest of the community and the interest of the individual residents. And the key of the CLT model is the permanent affordability. So the fact that not only the first people who will live in the apartment get help, but that in 20 years, 50 years, the apartment will remain affordable. So at the first, when we are building the apartments, the homes are affordable thanks to grants or donation. Most of the time it's subsidies from the Brussels region. But then the homes stay affordable thanks to a resale formula that I will explain you. And the CLT can control the resale thanks to some legal technicity. That should avoid the speculation. And so the resale formula, how does that work? So I try to make a graph. I hope it will be easy to understand. So let's imagine that the initial value of the property is the sum of all these squares. One part of the value is the land that has been paid by a subsidy. One part of the value is the building. One part of that has been financed also by a subsidy. And then there is the price that the first family will pay. You can see that the yellow square is lower than the real cost. Then when this family, in maybe 20 years, want to sell his home because they want to move out or to go somewhere else or to change, the value at that time is probably higher because there is some added value in the market. What they will do if there was no CLT model, they would sell it really at a very higher price than what we can that we would like. But we have a resale formula that says that they can only sell it to the price that they have paid at first, and 25% of the added value. And so for the second family, the home is also very affordable because the yellow or orange rectangle is really, really smaller than the real total price on the market. So that's the idea. Now, what we are doing is that we have 6 projects in the gray dots that are already inhabited. We have 4 to 5 projects that are in development around Brussels. So I don't know if some of you are familiar with Brussels, but as you see, there is the Brussels city and then the Brussels capital region that is a little bit bigger. And we essentially work on the zone where the ground prices is not too high because we have not that much finance. And so we have to work where we can buy ground for quite a cheap price. So today we have more than 800 people that would like to become homeowners. We have some supporting members. We have many associations that work with us. We have 100 homes that are finished and that are inhabited on 6 different projects that you could see on the gray dots. We have more than 100 houses in preparation. And our budget now for the team is around 1 million euros for really what we do every day, the operational cost, operating cost. And about the housing investment, our annual budget is around 6 million euros. What is very important for us is the public participation, and so it's maybe time to speak about our target group. So we are only accessible for people with social income. What does it mean? It's that the people who will buy a house at the CLT Brussels are not me or one of my colleagues, but really people that are eligible for social housing. They can come to us and we decide, we do not decide who will go in which house. The first in the waiting list is the first one to get a place. We created different categories among our public based on income because the idea was that if we would not discriminate between our public, the people with the lowest income would never be able to pay median price or an average price. And so we try to discriminate our public so that every slice of our public can pay 30% of its revenues, can give 30% of its revenue to repay the bank. Yeah, sorry for my English. What's very important for us also is to create a community, and the emancipation of our public is very important. So we work a lot on community building, and so among our team, almost half of the job that we are doing is for sure to create homes, but half of the job is also to create a community. And to do that, we ask for the people on our waiting list to participate in the projects and in the governance of our organization. And so they can really elaborate the Archi Labs, the idea. And so the governance for the participation of the people goes from the governance. I already said many times that they are part of the board, but we also have a members committee. Some of our residents think about what kind of action we could do to help the other residents. There is a lot of a feeling of community, but also about the design of housing projects within obviously the limits of public tendering. We try to allow our public to design the projects in some Archi Labs, as we call this. So we learn them and we educate them to understand architecture and to understand the passive requirements of our projects. They also participate in the management of the condominiums and in many community activities. So maybe a little look at the community activities that we can do. Some future inhabitants, when they know that they will live in a certain place, they start to create a flea market to create links with the future neighbors and neighborhood. So they have done that for like 2 to 3 years before the moving. We also noticed that some of our future inhabitants, they like to cook, and so we gathered them to create a kind of a cooking team. But then we understood that it was very important for them also to be paid and to get some money because they were with low income. And so we helped them to create a catering. And so now they work together once or twice a week. And every week they can work in a small restaurant and offer the food. We do also after-school program that works really well. So some of our inhabitants or some of our volunteers are helping the children of the community to do some homework or after-school programs. We do conversation tables because not all of our inhabitants speak French or Dutch. So there are 2 national languages in Brussels, the French and the Dutch, but most of our public comes from Africa. So some of them do not speak neither French nor Dutch. And so the conversation tables can help them to feel more confident and to understand the administrative papers that they have to sign. And we work a lot also about on mobility. So we know that on our public, very, very few people have a car. And so in Brussels, most of the time when you build a new place, you have to build 1 parking per apartment. We try to do 1 parking or 2 parking per project, so 10% maximum instead of 100%. And to convince the authorities, we work naturally with the public transportation, but also we try to educate people to bicycle, and so we have a lot of bicycle course or bicycle education. And now let's take a look at our different housing projects. So this is the first one. About the housing projects, I can tell you a lot because every project is the home of many stories. But this is our first place. It's about a building of 9 apartments. The gray and white building you can see here in the corner. It is inhabited since 2015. And this project called Arc-en-Ciel, so Rainbow, in Van der Perre-Boom Street in Molenbeek, is a very big project of 32 apartments and 1 feminist equipment on the ground floor. It took a long time to be built. These are the people who did the flea market in the street to know the neighborhood, and they did some neighborhood festivals and so on. So we try in every project to have a common garden, that's the minimum, some green spaces, but we try also in every project to have some equipment, and the idea is that the equipment will be added value for the neighborhood, so maybe it will be a social economic space, an association and so on, but also it will allow the inhabitants to gather when they have to do some meetings all together. Yeah, and so the inhabitants have been implicated in that project since the very beginning, and so they could follow the construction works. They could do some architecture labs and so on. Another project is called Le Nid, the Nest, in Verheden Street. It's in Anderlecht. This is a project with 7 apartments. One of them is for a person with reduced mobility, with a handicapped person. There is a collective garden open to the neighborhood, and there is 1 equipment that we will see. No, we will not see it here. So it's the same place, but by night. And so the place is inhabited since 2019, and the equipment is occupied since this year, since a few months ago. Here it's I don't know the word in English. It's an amenity. It's a place where some therapists can go and do. It really depends from one project to another. It's a local that can be occupied by an association, by some health care people. Yeah, it's a local actually. With a kitchen, with offices and so on. And so this one is the Calico Project I told you about. What is interesting here is I took a picture so you could see what we promise to the people and what we deliver, and it's quite similar actually. And what is very interesting in this project is that we didn't do only acquisitive home ownership program, but also we worked with some cooperatives. And so at the day of the inauguration, you can see some flags on the building, and it's to make the public understand in what part of the building we are. So with the purple flag, it's the feminist movement. So there is a cooperative with a feminist housing. There is a cooperative about the care and intergenerational care, and a birth place and a death place, and so on. So this is a very big project. It's 34 apartments and 5 equipments. It has been possible thanks not to a subsidy from Brussels region, but from the Europe. It was a FEDER project, Urban Innovative Action, and that helped us to get a lot of visibility from the Europe also about what we are doing. And so yeah, there are some equipments also there. So there is a local open to the neighborhood, and there is birth place and an end of life place. So people that are in palliative, do you say that? In a palliative situation, can decide not to go to the hospital for the last few weeks of their life, but to be in a place more like a home. And if they cannot stay home because it becomes too complicated with their situation. Yeah, this project is now achieved, but at that time it was still the work was still in construction. It's very interesting because it's really close. It's just across the street from our first project, and so we are starting to have a cluster of social housing home ownership in that neighborhood of Molenbeek. And it will be 31 apartments. And yeah, we have some more projects in construction. But for example, this one should, the construction work should start this year, if possible, because now we are facing quite a big issue in Belgium, but I think you have the same everywhere in Europe, is that the construction prices have been rising very, very high. And so we don't have the budget now to to give the construction the tender to the enterprises. Yeah, so apart from housing, we try to address many issues, some economical issues. So we help our members that want to develop their own business, like the catering business I showed you. Societal issue, because we fight against discrimination. Most of our people are people with a big family. Most of the time it's like single parent family coming from Africa, many from Morocco or Guinea. These people, it's very hard for them to find a house in Brussels because the market is still quite discriminating against the big family coming from outside Europe. Environmental, obviously in Brussels now, if you build a new home, you have to respect the passive standards. Do we say passive? So you have to make carbon neutral houses. And about citizenship, we really try to emancipate our members and to give them the more keys possible to become citizens of Brussels. And we have been very pleased a few years ago, some of our first inhabitants have been called the Citizen of the Year of the city of Molenbeek. So that shows that when you give them the opportunity to start as to work as citizen and to act as citizen, they use it and they really try to make the things change for the best. And some potential for development of our model. So as I told, our model is really based on subsidy. So in an operation, on average, 40% of the cost is paid by the Brussels region and 60% of the cost is paid by the inhabitants. In comparison with other social housing policies in Brussels, it's not more expensive at all. It's a little bit less expensive, but still it needs a lot of subsidy because, as I told you, the construction costs are really high in Brussels, the ground costs are high, and so it represents quite an important amount. So we try to work in a cooperative. So we developed with many partners a cooperative called Fairground Brussels. We associated ourselves with people working on the homelessness, working on social economy, working on the social housing, and we decided to create a cooperative. And the idea is to make the same concept of CLT, of community land trust, but not with the help of subsidy, but with the help of the savings of the people. Either organization or individuals can give part of the savings in our cooperative. During the time they let that money in the cooperative, we use it to buy ground, and we allow housing, social housing, or co-housing, or I don't know, some children facilities and so on to be built on the ground that we own. So that's, I think, a big potential for development because that will help us to go beyond the financial subsidies of the Brussels region. And another very important development for sure is to develop it outside of Brussels. So it's not our goal for us because our association and our organization works only in Brussels, but we really think that the model we have been fine-tuning for like 10 years now could really be an answer to many, many cities facing the same challenges as Brussels, because we are not on an island. Everyone is facing almost the same problem. And so we gather with 3 other cities, Ghent, Lille, and London, and we started a dissemination program called SHIC. It was a European program with peer-to-peer learning. We try to develop financial model to find finance solutions for all the cities in Europe with the help of like the European Bank of Investment or so on. And we started also a startup fund that worked quite well. And so now you can see, yeah, the blue dots are the CLT that are now existing and established. The gray or blue, yeah, sky blue are under creation at that time, and the yellow ones benefited from the startup fund. And so you can see that that project quite helped many CLTs to develop. I think that's it. Yeah. Okay. I am ready for some questions, and if you want to, we can have a round of questions now. And if you want, I will stay later on, and so you can come later.
Thank you very much, Thibault, and for a very nice and interesting presentation, especially for our context, which we are not familiar with community land trust at all. Zdaj pa čas za vaše vprašanje. Imamo enih 10-15 minut pred naslednjo okroglo mizo. Kakšno vprašanje? Mogoče vsem ta model ni toliko znan, da bi si ga lahko predstavljali. Yeah, looks like all is clear or all is not clear enough. Anja.
Hi, I'm Anya. I'm an architect, and I was always wondering, how CLT actually starts, meaning that where actually you got first money to buy land, because that was always a big question for me. How do you manage to collect so much money to buy land and then, of course, to continue the investment? So, yeah.
Thank you for your question. Yeah, I didn't develop a lot the financing scheme, but I can do it really with a great pleasure. So the idea for us was to work with the Brussels capital region, so the city of Brussels, let's say. And they have a social housing policy they use for like more than 100 years now to use all the money of the social housing policy for rental housing. And we try to convince them that home ownership could also be a solution for social housing. That was not an easy journey to convince them. But we, at the end of the day, we managed to receive some subsidies to buy the land. But the counterpart to that is that in our foundation, so we have an association and a foundation that are two entities. The foundation that receives the money to buy the land is controlled by the inhabitants, by the government, and by the civil society. But the government has the a right of veto, you know that? And so they can refuse that we sell the land. That's quite normal because we received a subsidy to buy it, so they can refuse that we sell it. And if the foundation doesn't work anymore and goes to bankruptcy, all the land that we own go back to the region. So actually, we are like a vehicle for the region to develop social housing home ownership program. They give us money, but we cannot sell the land. And if we stop our activities, the money and the land go back to the region. But so it was thanks to a subsidy, and it's very interesting. It was a very long struggle to make the Brussels city accept the idea to give us money. Since we are not a social housing traditional agency, and that we are not run only by the public authority, but we are a private actor.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll actually continue with these technical questions on the cost structure. So you showed this really nice graph, putting in cost of land, of this subsidy, and then the cost of the buyer. I'm wondering how normal this graph is. In essence, so if you would look at a similar graph for a normal market investor, there would be this huge percentage, which would be his profit margin. Yeah. So does that graph also show any kind of profit or are you selling it completely for non-profit? A lead up to that question is, are you also getting any revenues from that to then reinvest in further project, being able to develop faster? My first question. Second question is, you are taking the land off the market. You have some mechanisms that prevent buyers, the owners, to sell it for a market price. They still do increase their capital. You probably have some mechanism for yourself and CLT to prevent yourself to sell it for profit, but I'm wondering about this mechanism, how they work.
Yeah, I'll try to answer to both questions, but don't hesitate to reformulate if I didn't answer well. So first, about the profit or the margins, actually we really work with no margins at all, because when we are budgeting an operation, the cost of the operation, we have no control about it. The price of the land is determined at first. When we see a land, we know how much it is, and we try to buy the cheapest ones. And the prices of the construction, it doesn't depend of us, and most of you, I think, work in like the construction in a way or another. You know that it's very difficult to have good surprises. Most of the time, at the end of the day, you have like some bad surprises, and it's more expensive than what you expected. And so to support all these expenses, we receive a subsidy, but the subsidy is quite low. So until this year, so from 2012 to now, it was like 785 euros per square meter. So it's good, but it's not that huge. And we have the money that the people will pay, but we work with low-income families that can only spend 1/3 of the revenues to get the home. And if the price would be too high, they couldn't buy it. So the sale price is fixed, and it's also fixed because since we receive a subsidy, we cannot sell it for any price for sure, because otherwise we would have to reimburse the subsidy. And so our operation is at the very beginning, when we start an operation, we try to keep a margin of 5%, but it's more a margin for like the unexpected things than a profit margin. And at the end of the operation, we finished 6 projects. There was one project when we could keep 15,000 euros, so it's not a lot, and we gave that money back to the region to show we receive a subsidy. Since we were doing a margin, we give it to you back. For the other projects, there has been a very difficult problem in the construction. We had to change the enterprise, so there was a very big increase in the cost. So for that one, we had to find some gifts from people who, like philanthropes, give us money to finish the project. And for the other, we are really on the margin. So we have no margin for us. And that might be a question about our serenity, because if any project we have to fight so much, struggle so much to achieve the budget, it's maybe not very safe. But we might have a margin on the long term, because the people who live in the home, who are homeowners, the day they want to sell, we have the opportunity to buy it first and to resell it to someone else. And at that time, maybe if really it's necessary, maybe to help us to develop other projects, we could decide to buy the home for a certain price and to sell it a little bit higher. And so we could maybe realize some margin in the future. So we are creating maybe some treasure, do we say that, for the future generation, but it really depends of if it will be possible or not. So that was about the margin. And about the resale, the possibility of reselling the land. We tried, so we are an organization with some status, legal status, and in our status it's written that we cannot sell the land, and that first, if we want to do it, we have to ask the government permission to do it, and we have to ask our board of directors permission to do it. So we try to make them as much as possible obstacles to the sale. But if maybe for very good reasons, it will be interesting to sell, I don't know, the land where there is 10 homes, create 50 homes somewhere else, maybe we can do it, but we really need to avoid many obstacles. First of all is the acceptation by the government. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, thank you. Are there any other questions I can
I'm afraid we are running out of time a little bit. We'll have continue, so maybe one more question. Rok, then to you.
I was bluffing. No, but don't get me wrong, I absolutely love the project and what you're doing. Maybe a small critique or a question. I mean, so the project in Vienna, what we saw, a big part of it is huge social diversity things. Here, you're talking really about people with the lowest income, very specific social group. Are you in any ways worried creating very homogeneous environment way than talking about this Hollenbeek district? Again, has certain implications. So if there is any worry by doing projects in that way, creating ghettoization.
Yeah, that's a good question. Thank you for asking. First of all, you have to note that in Brussels, the people with the social housing incomes represent 40% of the inhabitants of Brussels. So really, this is still diverse. It's not all the inhabitants can live in our project, but 40% of the Brussels people can do it. And between people with really what we call alternative income, so people that do not work and have health allocation, or yeah, I don't know how to say that, and people who work but with a small income because they work as a nurse or as a teacher, I don't know, there is already quite a diversity. And so we think that our projects are already quite diverse in their way. But also what you have to keep in mind is that the people have low income at the beginning, but maybe in 5, 6, 10 years, they will have a better income, because we really think and we can see that when you have a good home and that you are at home, you don't have the fear that someone at some time will get you out. You can find new job opportunities or new education, and in a few years, you can really change your income. And we can see that for the first project that we developed in 2015, only 4 out of 9 families had a job, and 2 years later, 9 out of 9 families had a job, and so one is retired. But we really see that a good housing can really help the people to find a job, especially since there is no discrimination for them. If they earn more in a few years, they won't pay more. They have already bought the home, so they can really increase their income without any difficulty. But I must say that our Calico project that I showed you, the European project, and there are some social housing like we do in general, and there is one cooperative with an intergenerational project, people coming from different backgrounds, but some having more money, some of them being on social housing, but some having more money. And we can see that the mixity and the diversity in that project with our traditional target group is also really helpful and interesting. So we are really thinking about, in some projects, besides the social housing units we create, creating 1 or 2 units for people with more revenues, but we would accept the restrictions of a CLT, but maybe having more income.